Welcome to On the Bench. I am your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by the boys in black, Zach Blostein, Chris Nee. This is like the second time you've done this to me, guys.
I
If
think
I
we're
knew we were all
we both have the 24/7 sports
the polo,
yeah,
Zachary, what's up with that?
in the road a little bit today.
Oh, so you're trying to represent?
Yeah,
What's your issue with the Transformers tweets? Just
it's just too much.
well, it's like
You're
once a week is just too much.
you're sending it in our little group chat, and it's
Okay.
like, I mean, if you want to talk about those tweets, we're more than welcome to get into the dark side of your Transformers
Well,
fandom.
we have this. That's not new
Yeah,
to
but I
us.
think it's taken a step since the revelation that you write fan fiction about Transformers, and that's saying something.
Just because the Twitter algorithm has adjusted it for now. I mean, basically gay robots. I don't know what you want me to do. That's not my choice. I mean, it is
I
an
mean,
algorithm,
the
but
algorithm shows what you want to see.
does it? I mean, I think what happened was I was
I think
just
it
blown
caters.
away that was the thing that people were projecting because it's something we had joked about. I sent it to you guys, and now it just Oh, so you just you just explained the problem at hand. Okay, understood. Who wants to talk about FSU football today? Huh? Show of hands. Chris?
Yay.
Yeah, all right, let's get going. It's going to be actually a pretty busy episode of OTB. We have a little bit of dust to settle on the Gus bus departing town. I know that was a week ago, but if you guys remember the last time we did a podcast, uh, we were just finding out that Gus Malzahn was retiring. That was last Monday. So a week and a day, we got some clarity on who's going to be calling plays. Time to let our thoughts marinate on it. My first reaction at the time was to laugh. Yeah, it still was kind of funny, but a little bit more thought and nuance coming up here. We'll also talk about hoops, which is on a bit of a roll. 500 beers are going to be free. When is that? Tomorrow, Chris? Tonight. Oh, Tuesday night. So we got 500 beers for free for students to show up as long as you're 21 and whatnot. That's pretty cool. And we have Brett Nevitt here as well, who will jump in later on in the show, preview baseball season, which is coming up. So let's get into it. First, a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, Chattanooga Whiskey, crushing it in the craft distiller game. Does an awesome job with their entry level baseline bourbons and ryes, but also experimental batch stuff as well. Right now, their distillery, they're starting out like an Irish infused whiskey that sounds pretty cool. So it's gonna be like Irish whiskey, a little smoother, I think, in that regard. Get more of the butterscotch, vanilla notes that's traditional with Irish whiskey. I'm curious to see their spin on it. Not maybe one that I tried to procure and get my hands on because I'm a big Irish whiskey fan. And then Buyer Sonone is sponsored by
The Turner Group.
the Turner Group. Colin, Amy Turner, great people, do a fantastic job in the home selling market in Central Florida, throughout the state of Florida. They can get you literally where you want to go. All right, guys, Gus Malzahn, let's talk about that real quick. He retires last week. Not the best timing early in February. What do we learn about that? Since what is some of our reporting shown from why he left and how FSU plans to replace him? Chris, I'll throw this to you.
Well, on the why he left, it's similar to what he considered at the end of November and the very beginning of December, which was a family-related situation that was drawing his attention. It was tough to balance both worlds of football and family. And as a guy who's made a lot of money and done it for a really long time, I think finally family won out in the sense of walking away and retiring. Good luck to him in retirement. Timing isn't great, but it is what it is. FSU wasn't going to go out and spend a lot of money on OC based on the indications of how they went about hiring people this offseason. Plus, truthfully, I don't think they really had the appetite for wanting to hire a new OC because you're almost certainly giving at least a 2-year contract and almost certainly a 3-year contract in that situation. And they're not really in a rush to add a lot of contracts that don't expire after this coming football season for obvious purposes. CEO Mike is no more. RIP CEO Mike. Back to
We hardly knew ye, right? That was a brief thought.
Back to OC Mike. I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the two offenses mirror each other to some degree. I would describe them as sort of second cousins. But I'm interested to see what the players that were acquired, because they were acquired for a Gus Malzahn offense. I'm talking portal players that were acquired in December and into January. How it's all going to work. That's probably the most interesting storyline that this has borne for me.
Yeah, my initial reaction was just like, of course, like this is how this plays out, right? I don't think anyone's faulting Gus Malzahn for wanting to retire. I mean, he's been like he's accomplished pretty much everything you'd want to accomplish as a college coach, and has done it at so many different levels. And I think it makes sense, especially considering like his family situation, to step away. And if that's for good, then I think he's left his impression on college football. But from a Florida State perspective, I mean, this is like pretty disastrous news in my opinion. I don't know if I'm being a little hyperbolic, but
if you're having to say you're being a little hyperbolic,
maybe.
right after you say
So,
it, we'll allow you to.
I don't think you're being a little. I think you're being a lot.
Well, go ahead and
I'm surprised, Chris, that you think I'm being hyperbolic.
go ahead and elaborate, but I'm allowing you. Like, you could walk back.
Yeah.
So disastrous was too strong of a word. You can walk it back. That's fine.
So here's my thought. You just, for the last year plus, essentially, since Gus Malzahn got to the program, we're recruiting high school players and attracting offensive transfer talent to play for his system. And I know the argument. So these are 1-year rosters and things can be flipped. Well, you just basically spent the entire offensive high school recruiting window of this past year recruiting towards his system, and then this transfer window, a critical one for Florida State, especially at the quarterback position. The whole selling point behind Ashton Daniels was, oh, well, he might not be a great traditional quarterback, but you don't really need one for Gus Malzahn's scheme. Well, we've seen what a not good quarterback looks like in a Mike Norvell scheme with DJU, and it can get pretty disastrous. And that's not to say that Gus Malzahn's offense, even with a subpar quarterback, is anything to write home about. I mean, I'm with a lot of the FSU fans who were not like enthused by the offense this past year, right? It felt like they kind of ran up the numbers. I mean, they did run up the numbers against lower level opponents, and then when they had to show up in a big game aside from Alabama, I mean, they didn't. So to me, that's what makes this like a potentially disastrous kind of move, and not like I said before, not at the fault of Gus Malzahn, but just, of course, it happens to Florida State. Whereas they can't go into a real OC search, and because like to me, like I feel like people look at the 2024 season with Mike Norvell calling plays, and I agree that his play calling was not one of the probably top 3 issues of that season. But if there was talent on that team, like, and he's the head coach and the offensive coordinator calling plays, like, you got to find a way to make it work. And it was one of the worst offenses in Florida State history. So I don't know why, like, that's the most recent sample size, and it feels like people are kind of giving him a pass for that, and being and kind of just pointing to the fact that the offensive play calling is kind of the way he like carved out his career. And my point is, so he's now getting back into offensive play calling, and he didn't get to recruit for his system basically for the last year, including this most recent transfer window. So feels like he's not being set up for success, and almost that he's being set up for failure. And I know there's some similarities between the schemes, but it just it feels like, yeah, like what I said, he's being set up for failure with how the roster's been assembled and the role that he's now stepping back into.
I just don't think it changes the outcomes a whole lot. I mean, I think on the 24 comparison, the biggest difference to me is I think the O-line this year will be at least capable, and that 24 O-line was dreadful. It was sort of DOA for most games. And like quarterback, we all know I'm not a big Ashton Daniels fan in the sense of that being the take and that what you did at the position, regardless of who your OC is going to be, who's calling the plays. I think you swung way too low at a position that's way too important. But I mean, I think he'll be capable enough to do some things for you offensively, but I'm not expecting. I with Gus, without Gus, with Mike calling plays, with Gus calling plays, I don't have much of any expectations for this coming season, so it doesn't dramatically change things for me.
I think it's more a matter of process is kind of what you can critique because I agree with you, Chris. Like I wasn't taking a number to get in line for. Do people do that now, anyways? Like for like butcher stuff, probably not. But like I wasn't excited to see Gus Malzahn on offense. I do think they have nice pieces on offense. I do have a level of optimism for it. Relative, like could it be a top 25 to 35 unit? Like I think that's kind of what you're looking at, and I think there's a path to that. So I do have a level of general optimism. But to Zach's point of like not optimizing your resources, what you do have available, I think that's where you can be critical to say that timing of Gus stepping down and how you went shopping for pieces in the transfer portal, like would you have done it differently? And almost all the answers are yes. So just by its own conclusion of how it played out, you didn't take steps to optimize your 2026 roster. I mean, I think it could still work out, right? Like it could still work out without taking the best steps possible. But you didn't help your odds there by having a person in the building making decisions on personnel, at least being involved in the decisions on personnel, I should say, who then leaves at the end of the personnel cycle. I mean, even the assistant coaches who get promoted or get brought in were Gus Malzahn guys. The Ashton Daniels point that the Zach mentioned, like, is that who Mike Norvell would have handpicked if he were in charge here? Would like a Tony Tokarz have still been what?
I thought he was in charge. He is kind of the head coach. Like,
I know what
you mean, but like that.
Well, not of the offense, man. He was not in charge of the offense. That's very clear.
Like, I don't think Mike Norvell would have taken Tommy last year, just for example.
Yeah, I think Tommy was the marriage created completely by the hiring of Gus Malzahn. Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think there's a degree of that with Ashton, without a doubt. But like, the program's not well operated these days. I'm not going to go revisionist that suddenly I think it would be dramatically different this coming season with or without Gus being the one picking the groceries.
Are you taking a deck chairs in the Titanic kind of approach, Chris? Like, what does it matter? Is that kind of what
I don't think they were going to go out and acquire a quarterback of a high level. It may have been somebody different than Ashton Daniels, but I don't think they ever truly had the appetite to go do that.
Or the ability to attract one too, unless they were finding $6 to $8 million to go get Darian Menser or something.
But we know some quarterbacks were looking at were not. I mean, you reported on this, Brendan, that they were not enthused to go play in a Gus Malzahn scheme.
Yeah, a couple of guys who I think are power four starters. Not to say that those would have been the answers. I don't want to put the names out there, but yeah, there were some that eliminated them right off the bat. But I don't know. There could have been guys who have been like, I don't want to play for Mike Norvell offense too, right? Like I don't. Yeah.
So here, like to what you're saying, Chris, about like Ashton Daniels, like I think a lot of the appeal for him would have been like, some of his deficiencies could be masked because, first of all, we're going to run the ball a ton in a Gus Malzahn scheme.
But I don't think that's true with Gus. Tommy's weren't masked. They still lost 7 games, and they lost plenty of games because of some of the stuff Tommy did at quarterback. Like, that to me is like telling yourself a lie to feel better about yourself. Like, I don't really believe that. Like, can you be a good down-to-down football team? And no, you can't at Gus Malzahn offense because that's not what it does. It's not how it operates. It's not what it aspires to be. But when you're taking mid to lesser quarterbacks, they're going to be.
I mean, so if we're
Ashton,
well, if we're talking
arm because he plays for Gus Malzahn.
If we're talking about like masking issues, like I mean, go look at Tommy's 2024 season versus his 2025 season, and the turnover stuff. I mean, his throwing stuff was masked. I mean, when the game was on the line and he had to go out there and make a play, yes, it was not pretty. That's because they could not get out to leads and they could not have early down success. But
the offense doesn't require a high efficiency passer to hit its peak. The issue is the peak for that offense is not very high compared to what other peak offenses could be. And also, it does mask the offensive line to an extent, I would say. You're able to have a relative successful offense with no guys who are going to be drafted. So.
Yeah, as long as they can push forward and create a little space, and you can be effective as a running team.
Yeah, I just don't. So my point is, I don't think Mike Norvell's offense can do that. Like, I don't think it's remotely the same.
I think he'd be an utter idiot if he doesn't lean into what Herb Hand has up front. That's the best other than Deuce Robinson. That's the best party offense that they have coming back.
You're saying as an asset is Herb Hand as a offense?
Like,
yeah, I mean,
but it's
going to be interesting dynamic is because Mike's play calling has
have to be successful, and if they're not willing to do that, regardless of who's calling plays, and like fire them and let's move on.
Well, that's another example of. It's another example of would your process have been different? I agree. Herb Hand seems from my vantage point, what I can tell, has done right by Florida State in terms of the in-season coaching stuff, the high school recruiting, transfer portal recruiting. We can have a different conversation there, but that's not the point right now. The issue that I see is, and we'll see how Mike marries it all together. But Mike Norvell's running schemes historically change year over year. Now it became very counter heavy in the final couple years at Florida State, but that wasn't always the case when he was at Memphis, even early on at Florida State. It just became transitionally more towards that. But you would see certain teams would have be outside zone dependent, inside zone, gap stuff. Like they would change it up if you just look at some of the numbers on it. Point being is that Herb Hand has kind of made his bones being an inside zone specialist. So I think they had, you look at the ratio of inside zone runs that they had this past season. Mike Norvell teams have never had anything close to that, and that was part of what he was excited about with Gus Malzahn, Herb Hand, and the way they would have things together working. Would you have brought in a different type of offensive lineman potentially? Would you have brought Herb Hand back for another season if you knew that Gus was leaving? Those are just different things that just for fit, how can you make it all work? That's what it feels to me ultimately, guys, is we're going to see them try to cobble it together. And that doesn't mean it can't work out with that. Again, it can. But I'm talking about, is it optimal? Is it ideal? No. But we're covering 7 wins in 2 seasons. So I think the answer to that generally is no. So no to rehash that. I will say this, an element of the dynamic that I like, or at least I'm excited to cover this season, is if Mike's going to go down, he's going down swinging, it's going to be with his offense. He's making the calls, okay, that at least fine. There's some value in that. I can get behind it. I'm intrigued by it. I don't know if it's optimal. I don't think it is, but that's where you're at. More so the process of going to CEO for a year. It clearly did not work with, he was supposed to have his tendrils on the team's, mental resolve where they were at. They fell apart towards the end of the season. They couldn't win on the road. They checked out against Florida very clearly. So that was the off season was a renegotiation window constantly, proverbially for all of January. So yeah, the CEO Mike role didn't work. It's just kind of, to me, it's a gut check of, all right, we're going back to what we were doing before. This didn't work. It's just a game of whack-a-mole is how it feels. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of Florida State fans. But that's kind of, you made the decision to ride with Mike financially. You said we couldn't justify the buyout, the market that it would take to bring in a new coach, the options that you thought were available to sign up to coach at Florida State. It just wasn't worth it for the decision makers. That was their decision. But this is the kind of stuff that brings is this whack-a-mole game continues because you're not operating in an optimal setting. And there we go. So those are my thoughts on the matter. How are we feeling? Good? Anything else? That was a very vivacious swig of water, Christopher. What are you doing what are you doing for your birthday?
I did it last weekend. Went away.
What was it?
We went to the beach. Just relaxed. Nice.
Chris is for those who don't know, he's a Valentine's Day baby. So I think I was conceived on Valentine's Day, given my birthday, but we don't know for sure. But that is a theory that's speculated. Anyway, Anyways, who wants to get to our? I can hear people now. It's so annoying on the podcast. All right, report card process of defensive line, linebacker, secondary is how we're going to grade it. So the process of retention, who you decide to let go, who you brought back, and then secondarily, who you brought in, how you brought them in, what remains, how you filled needs, all that stuff. So just the totality of the process to get to the room that you're going to field in 2026, what it looks like currently is what we're going to grade. I was going to do edge and interior defensive line and safety and cornerback. It's going to get too confusing. So defensive line, let's start off. I gave the actual acquisition process a D, I think it was, if I remember correctly. I think in totality, looking at the room, bringing back the Desirs, I'm going to start off the bidding guys with a optimistic C.
I trend towards like a C minus. So my thing is they have 17 D linemen. My concern is the top of that room. It's almost like they made the decision because of the Twins and probably the expense of the Twins not to go acquire anybody with any real experience other than Jordan Sanders. And it's just crazy to me. I mean, you're going to lean on essentially, I think it's 11 guys who will be either in their first or second, or I'm sorry, entering their first season or having one season under their belt. And that's just an insane ratio for defensive line.
What was the number again, Chris?
I think it's 11 of 17 will be in their first year or entering their first season playing. So, guys who will be freshmen, sophomores, or redshirt freshmen.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Jalen Anderson is kind of a wild card to me because
the Joker is wild, you would say?
You can use him at the edge. He's going to be at that role that Diamante Diggs is kind of currently probably the leader in the clubhouse for, which in itself, me saying that out loud, wow. Yeah, I don't love that group. I don't love what they did. Rylan Kennedy, if it hits, it can change that narrative very quickly. He's essential to them having success there. But, he's yet to do it in college, and we've seen this before at FSU. I do like him. I do think he has ability, but we'll see if it actually turns into production.
I think with Kennedy, real quick before we get to Zach, I think with Rylan Kennedy, who's brought in from A&M, if he was your the equivalent, it was like a third down specialist, right? Or for baseball, like a closer, someone you brought in situationally at a high volume. I'd be intrigued by that. I think that would be good, given the lack of proven edge rushers around him. I think the role might be placed on him and to be more than he actually has proven to be in his college career with 3 seasons under his belt. So I have a level of skepticism there, given how you attained him, how you brought him. I don't think that was a good process, just based on the totality of the room. It's maybe a little unfair to the player himself, but that's a situation that I think they're in. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going D+. I like that they kind of gutted the room a little bit of guys that were not going to be contributors, but I almost found myself being okay, so when are we adding players to this room? And it felt like because of the whole Desir Twins saga of trying to retain them and having that money kind of held up, they just didn't either think or couldn't afford to bring in other guys in that room besides Jordan Sanders and Rylan Kennedy, who I think both can be 2 deep players, or will have to be, but I don't know that that's an ideal role for them at Florida State. So yeah, I mean, I'm just pretty down on the room, if you can't tell.
No, the D plus let us think that you're very optimistic about
it. And to Chris's point, relying on so many freshmen and first or second year players with in a position group that relies so heavily. I mean, we've seen it the highest level. I mean, it's guys that have a ton of experience under their belt, and I don't think any of us would describe Florida State's true freshman defensive line class as guys that are ready to come in and play. I mean, it's a lot of developmental types, a lot of guys, on the edge that need to put on some weight and get into college, strength and conditioning program. And then on the interior, I mean, that was the whole like Franklin Whitley, late riser, just started playing football. Ernest Rankins, like, has to fill out in his frame, and it's just like, okay, you're throwing those guys in the fire, and I don't, hopefully you get a few, Desir like true freshman seasons. You're going to need that if you're going to field a competent group, in my opinion, this year.
That is the idea of throwing numbers at the problem. If you can't attain high, what am I looking for? For like a high probability contributors, like the next best thing is to go ahead and throw numbers at it.
I know that was their strategy, but I don't think that see, this is where we get in the weeds of like, okay, well, who is making these rosters decisions before or during the high school window, and then how did that change into the transfer window, the GM switch? And I don't think that they thought that they were going to be relying on this many, true freshmen or young defensive linemen, and then the John Garrett gets hired and gets put in this role, and they're like, okay, like, we just spent all this money on adding like 7 defensive linemen out of the high school and JUCO ranks. Like, don't really have much to go, many spots or much money to go add more in the portal.
Well, let's talk about what they brought back that could be helpful. The Desirs, the way that the offseason played out, the drama around that retention, I want to try to put that aside and just talk about the players. They were good as true freshmen, with the context of they were true freshmen. They were not consistently good power forward defensive linemen. They had flashes. They actually had some really good flashes. But you look at some of their PFF grades, you watch, if you just focus on them for an entire game, there's times where they're getting washed out and bullied too. But they also show the capability to bully much older offensive linemen. And so like you're taking the calculated gamble of them taking a big step forward with how they react to things, technique, just all the elements that come with getting better. So you bring back Daryl Desir, probably more of an edge guy, Mandrell Desir, who I think is a really good fit for the Tony White, changing defensive front scheme. You bring back Daniel Lyons. He's kind of a forgotten man. He's just like, he's steady, but not like, it doesn't feel steady on a down basis. It feels like more like the totality of his performance through the course of a game ends up being like steady, but there's peaks and valleys as far as I can tell. But you bring him back. You bring back Deontay McCray, who is steady on a down basis. I think he's low impact, but the good and bad. Like he doesn't do a lot of bad things for you. He doesn't do a lot of dominant things too. He's meat and potatoes. He's fine. I think that's really it in terms of like contributors from last season who had some meaningful snaps that you bring back. Obviously, Kevin Wynn, you're banking on taking a step forward. Chris mentioned Diamante Diggs. It was an interesting decision for both parties. I did not see that coming. So that's it. So, but we're talking about 4 guys who you feel decent about, none really proven. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but like I don't think you have an adequate Darrell Jackson replacement. I don't think you have someone who's going to command double teams as consistently as he was. By the way, was really good at the Senior Bowl, earned some All Senior Bowl praise, honors. So what do I know, right? So yeah, I don't know if you have anyone to actually replace that. Like, in that, unless it's Kevin Wynn, if you're running a 3-man front with some level of consistency and you have a nose tackle need, like, I don't feel great about that. And then we've talked about the lack of speed. Fastball throwers at defensive end, I don't love that either. And so I have concerns about the totality of the defensive line room. I don't think it'll be a bad unit, but it does feel incomplete to me.
Yeah, so at speed rush and like stand-up end, Jack, whatever you want to title that, you've got Diggs leading from the front, which I'm not a huge fan of.
There's no way he's going to lead from the front, man. Like, I mean, right?
I'm saying right now, when they're doing stuff as a team right now, it's like him, and then you've got Jalen Anderson, you got Rylan Kennedy, you've got Chris Carbon, Jamin Pickney. Those are sort of guys that fit into that role. I just have no clue who's going to do it. Like, that's why I think Jalen is a big piece for them as a JUCO. I also will say I've gotten to know Jalen a bit. He has a mentality of a kid who doesn't want to sit around and wait because he went to JUCO and understands like time goes fast type of thing. So if he's going to do it, I think he's going to try to do it from the get-go. He's a guy, he's committed to learning the playbook, those kind of things. Like he has a desire to contribute there, but I don't love that by any stretch.
Real quick on Jalen Anderson, like I watched him a little bit more close the other day. Like there's some good stuff there on film, like with some of the power he's able to generate, plays with high effort. Saw him in person, and the frame's a little bit better than I thought. I think like poor man's Jared Verse is kind of where the mind goes. Again, not saying he's Jared Verse. Don't clip that, please. But he had 7.5 sacks at the JUCO level last season. I think he had 2 the year before. So like the expectation that's a difference maker, I don't think that's fair to bestow upon him. I'm not saying you are, Chris. I'm just more for if that's, I want to put proper context to what he could be, which should be a situational guy this year, and see how his frame fills out. If he can get to 255, play with that consistently as a senior. I think that's like, can he be an all conference guy as a senior is what you're hoping for. But that's not the like most realistic path.
Yeah. I know they'll make the argument that you don't necessarily need speed rush ends, that you can play with bigger ends. You know, we've seen some schools do that. Miami comes to mind last year, for example, but Miami also
you can if you have 2 first-round draft picks, like
right.
At those big ends. Yeah, sure.
So yeah, behind quarterback being neglected and taking somebody like Ashton Daniels, the D-line effort, it blows my mind. And you know, everybody will be in a rush to blame T9. You know, maybe he's a culprit to some of it. It's not solely him. There are other people making decisions that made the decisions not to do more at that position. To Zach's point with GM situation and financials.
Yeah, I think I don't think the like transfer portal stuff really falls on Dina. I think that's an entire defensive staff, and then moving up to GM stuff. But I think, you know, like if we're going to get into the weeds of it, and we kind of already explained it. I think some of the high school recruiting like could have been better early on at that position but I mean, might have not mattered with how the season played out. So, but yeah, I think you guys summed it up well. Like I think we're all kind of in the same ballpark of thinking about the D line and how they've assembled it. And yeah, I'm really interested to see kind of who emerges, especially in the you know, Jack role. Like that feels like it's wide open for anyone to take. My money would be on Rylan Kennedy kind of being the main dude there, and then hopefully Jalen Anderson comes along to be, you know, a potential rotational guy.
All right, let's move. So far, that was a C for me, a C- for Chris, a D+ for Zach. Just let the record show. Optimistic. Linebacker. Let's get into the linebacker room. I gave the transition or transactional process of bringing guys in a B. I like Chris Jones. I like, is it Makai or Malik? Makai?
He goes by Kai.
Kai. All right, Makai Bayer. Thank you, nickname guy. Makai Bayer from UNC. Previously was at Nebraska under Tony White. So I like the Chris Jones take. I think that's a high ceiling type of guy, you know, fairly like fine floor, like probably going to be adequate. I think he had a 65 PFF grade at Southern Miss as a true sophomore. He'll probably keep getting better. Looks the part for sure. And Bayer, looks like he's going to be a fine rotational guy. The totality of what you brought back, I don't know, man. C-, like it seems like it's probably like a slightly below average power 4 room is probably the most likely place for me. You bring back Blake Nicholson. There's obviously tools there, but he's getting late into his career to where you have to wonder if the tools start manifesting in something. Omar Graham really didn't build on how he ended the 2024 season. I thought that was disappointing. You lose Juice Cryer. Okay. You bring in some talented true freshmen, but they're true freshmen. So yeah, C- to me. That might be generous on my end as well, but I'll go C-. Chris, what about you?
I'm a C for the totality of everything that they did there. I think you brought in a starter in Chris Jones. I think Isaiah Williams is a guy who's going to be a 2-deep helper for you as long as he's healthy, which he seems to be healthy. You returned Blake, who became a pretty consistent starter for you down the line. The fact that you only played 2 at the spot, it's not one of those where you need desperation and a ton of numbers. Now you need injury luck at a position with guys hitting people. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm also a fan of Karan Maycock. I think he is a guy who can help him some maybe later in the year.
Zachary, what about you? What do we got?
Yeah, I'm also at a C in the totality of the room. You know, I like I was surprised and happily surprised by the the acquisition process. Those two kind of names emerged late, with Chris Jones getting out of his signed grenade with Ole Miss to flip to Florida State, and then Kai Bayer was like a late, kind of addition as well in the portal for FSU. I think amongst the options that FSU had at linebacker, I think those were two of the better ones in the portal. And then, not a huge fan of the guys returning on the roster. I think there's potential for Isaiah Williams to have, a breakout kind of true freshman campaign, but he's still recovering from ACL reconstruction surgery, and that's a process. So I don't know that he's going to be fully healthy and ready to like go full go until the summer. And that's a lot to ask for a true freshman. And I think he has a lot of like plus athleticism traits, but processing the game, especially at a higher level, like that's going to be something to keep an eye on. I think, because it's just tough for any true freshman. And yeah, I like Karan Maycock, but I don't know that he'll be ready to contribute like day one. But I think Chris's point could be valid with him, maybe becoming an option for them later in the year. The wild card for me is Caleb LaValle.
Ooh, kind of a forgotten man there.
Yeah, he didn't play at all this past year because he was just constantly injured and on a scooter. So hopefully
is that funny? Is that funny to you?
Well, it was just like every time I saw him, he was on a scooter. I'm like, dang,
it's probably not a great sign. Those scooters are usually kind of scary to see.
So hopefully he gets fully healthy and he's able to go this year. Because they were excited about, some people were excited about him, like the addition of him from UNC last year. He kind of finished his UNC season on a high note with like a really good bowl performance. So interested to see if he becomes a 2D player. But yeah, I mean, they're gonna need Chris Jones to take a pretty big step, I think, to be kind of their like alpha in that room. And then hopefully, between Omar, Blake, and Kai Bayer, like you're able to find someone else that's reliable.
I think I'd feel a lot better if like Chris Jones was your number 2, but you're banking on him to be your number 1. That's probably the state of where that room is right now, hence the C range grades for all of us. Let's move on finally to the secondary here. So you end up adding 4. Mekhi Jones from Duke was a sub-starter as a true freshman, ends the year on a really high note on a solid defense. CJ Richard is a rising redshirt sophomore from Illinois State. He was excellent in the playoffs at the FCS level. I think he played 17 games last season. Carson Hobbs from Notre Dame ended up losing his starting spot, and they kind of got it because of injury, but really didn't do much with it to force himself into the lineup for the rest of the year. I think he only played like 6 or 7 games. And then Nehemiah Chandler, the defensive back from South Alabama, played high school ball here in the Big Bend. Has been at a lot of schools, frankly, and I think throughout high school and in college, I think 6 or 7 schools in as many years now. So you're hoping for some stability there, and a guy who obviously has familiarity with Florida State's program. From a retention standpoint, I think the big addition or re-addition there would be Jabril Rawls. You really kind of a surprising add on back to the roster. Thought he was as good as gone when he was talking about entering the transfer portal. Had deals in place at other program, and you end up, I think, probably paying a pretty penny to bring him back. But he does come back. And then you also retain Ashton Barker, who had a foot out the door. There was the guys you lost, Edwin Joseph. I think both sides are better off moving on. Where did Edwin end up? Was it Texas?
Ole Miss, I think. Miss. Right?
Okay. I can't remember. I remember Texas was in a discussion or a visit at some point. I don't know where he ended up.
Yeah, Ole Miss.
Okay, Ole Miss. Earl Little Jr. went pro. He then came back. He then went in the transfer portal. He lands at Ohio State. So that's a guy who I thought you could potentially, like, there's a lot of good things that Earl did, but I thought you could also stand to upgrade from him, and I think you might have. But overall, guys, I think this is a I feel like I'm going to set the tone here. I kind of like what they did in the secondary. B- is what I'm going to go with here. I think it's potentially being above average group.
Go ahead, Zach.
I'm a little lower on it, so I'll go C+. I just think that I like that you're able to retain Jabril and Ashland, obviously. But that was not an easy process for both of them. And I think that it's just like I feel like the guys they added, I'm hopeful that like a CJ Richard can be an immediate contributor. I like the frame and like what he put on film in the latter portion of his most recent season. But it just feels like they lack like high end talent in the room, and they're really banking on some of these guys like that are returning, like a Charles Lester, to kind of take the next step. And I think that's even more so the case in the safety room, right? Like I think that they're really looking for those spots besides Ashton Barker to kind of come into picture. I think Mekhi Jones can be a dude for them. He played well in the ACC, and I think that there's a potential transition there that would make sense for him to kind of step into. But I do think that there's just a lack of experience throughout the rest of that room, and it's just a lot banking on guys taking big steps this upcoming year for them to be a capable unit.
So they're carrying 19 total defensive backs. I kind of look at it in a view of fives, like tearing it 5 guys at a time. So that first 5 for me is Jabril, Chandler, Barker, probably Richard and Jones. I think those are probably your starters. Agreed. That second there is then like a Quindarius Jones and either Charles Lester or Kennan. That's your corners. And then KJ Kirkland, Carson Hobbs, and I'm going to go with Trey Bell probably as your next. Well, I guess Donnie if he's healthy because they like him when he's a veteran. Donnie. I do like Trey Bell a lot, though. I do think Trey Bell is a freshman along with Chauncey Kennan, who's got a shot of helping there in the secondary. But, like, I'm already in the head-shaking portion of it in the second team. So, like, I don't love the group. I don't hate the group. I think Chandler is the biggest wild card of the bunch because they're definitely paying him to be a starter alongside Rawls, in my opinion. And I'm just interested to step up in competition, how he handles it. I have a level of skepticism with that until I see it. Until I see him go against a high-level receiver and play at a really high level and be consistent for 4 quarters and make tackles at a high level, be physical. That last part is probably the most interesting part to me with him. And he knows that. He's spoken about that's an area where he believes he needs to improve. So, like, I just think you're putting a whole lot on a guy's shoulders who hasn't ever played at this level. And we'll see. And I guess grade-wise, I'm a solid C. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Retaining Rawls was huge. Whatever on Barker. I like Ashland Barker. They played better when Barker played last year than when he didn't. But there's also a level of, like, I would have been fine moving on after his comments. But that's whatever.
That's how I feel about Barker, too, is, like, the play. And I liked him as a person consistently. But just, like, the comments, I'm going to get criticized here by Chris for reading too much into it. But, like, the Tour Duty video where they have everyone shouting out, keep climbing, and he's just kind of like, keep climbing. Like, I don't know. There's just an element of like, do you want to be here? Your actions very loudly told us in a small window, they told us that you probably don't want to be here.
That was, and to kind of bring that back, like to their kind of the point of this offseason, like I heard that they really wanted to weed out guys that were not fully bought in. And like, I don't think you fully did that. Right.
Well, you can't just the actions that we again the window
bit screwed at safety depth wise.
That's fine, but you can't say that you're weeding out people who don't want to be here. In the actions, he literally told you, I regretted coming back.
Right. Well, that's talking out both sides of their mouth. They do that a lot.
Okay. All right. That's fair. But that's what we have to evaluate. Right? We have their plan and then their actions, and then
Chris's points like to any of this stuff is just they suck. Like what's not worth arguing about?
I don't know. It's not that. I just like they're a 7-win team over the last 2 years. I don't think they went and got better.
We're saying the same. We're saying the same thing. We're saying it in different ways, and I think we're just trying to evaluate.
I appreciate that Herb Hand does his job in the portal. I enjoy that. I love the Wisner take, for example. There are things that I did like, things that were positive. So, like, I don't want people to think everything I think is bad. It's not bad for me. My issue is that, I view football as trenches, quarterback, and then can you stop the opposing quarterback, whether that's suppressing the passing game or being good at pass rush. I don't think what FSU did defensively does either of those things.
I think that's fair.
All right, I got to head out, boys.
All right, get out of here. Chris, we're going to talk hoops, then we're going to bring in Brett to talk a little baseball. I got to run like in 15 minutes, so you guys might have to take us home. Anyway, chiropractic adjusted because I got the scoliosis going on. Painful. Let's talk a little bit about hoops. They're on a 3-game winning streak, which is pretty cool. But really, I think the element of this I find super interesting, Chris, as they go into a top 20 play against top 20 Virginia coming tonight, is like the season felt very much so on the brink with the NC State game. That's 7 or 8 games ago. Since then, you've lost 3 contests, close contests. You've won 4, and everything's been close. You're playing like a 500 basketball team, but within that, Luke Laux has had to shift the way he wanted to play. He wanted to play this very high tempo, 3-point type of style, and he's shifted that. A lot of these games are in the 80s. They're becoming slugfest. That's commendable. I want to get your thoughts on just what you've seen develop in the last month or so. Obviously, it's an encouraging step forward, but just like, how do you contextualize it all, Chris?
I think we've seen Luke grow as a coach in real time, as a head coach. Like, Luke's got a ton of coaching experience from his time in the NBA, but there's a difference when you're the one calling the shots, and that it's up to you. How are we going to win this basketball game we're playing right now, right here? He was downright embarrassed by what happened back on January 10th. That's the NC State game when they lost by damn near 50 at home.
Oh, exactly a month ago. Wow.
Yeah, they rolled over and played dead. They played no defense. They allowed every shot to go. It was a layup line, and they were pathetic. And he was pissed off about it. So he went and did something about it. They go to Syracuse. They lose by a bit. They play Wake Forest. They lose by 1. They really should have won that Wake Forest game. But to me, the Wake game was sort of the moment where it looked like it took, because they played really high-level defense. They played really hard. They just couldn't make shots in that game. If they made a couple more shots, they'd win that game. Since then, they've been pretty good. 4 or 5, about now 4 and 6 in the league. I think they're 11 and 12 overall, I believe, is where they're sitting going into the Virginia game tonight. I've just been impressed twofold. One, I think Luke's done a good job evolving in real time, and that doesn't surprise me. I have a very high opinion of his acumen, his maturity, and his desire to win. He's ultra competitive. He's been ultra competitive since the day I started talking to him when he was 16 years old and a recruit. So the fact that he's still that way 20 years later doesn't surprise me in the least. The more impressive thing to me is in this day and age of mercenary athletic teams, and especially in basketball where it was a mass turnover, those guys have stayed committed to it. And I to a level, appreciate that. Chauncey Wiggins probably embodies it better than anybody. I mean, Chauncey, I'm not trying to put him down, but he was essentially a role player at Clemson. He was a talented guy who was a role player. FSU made him their highest paid player and their central figure, and he had to go be the guy, and he struggled with that at times out of the gate. He's been much better lately. When he goes, they go, and he's been good at that. Their defense has improved dramatically. Their continuity as a group has improved dramatically. I think Alaire Malouk coming in, knocking down the 2 free throws when Alex Steen fouled out against Notre Dame, which ultimately ended up really being the difference in that game, kind of speaks to the team mentality. And I think it's a good team mentality. The pivot to defense away from the high octane, and they're still shooting a lot of threes, but they're not shooting as many as they once were. That speaks to good coaching. But there's also the element of like the players, they cared. They wanted to be better than they were. And I think tonight's going to be fun. Virginia is a really good team who rebounds their backsides off, really well coached by Ryan Odom. He's an excellent basketball coach. And I think Virginia is by far the better basketball team, like top to bottom, depth, having multiple bigs throw at it, 2 really high-level guards, including a freshman who comes off the bench. He scores in double figures. Like, they can do things. But I think FSU is going to battle their ass off. And I think it's going to be a festive bunch, especially with a few beers floating around for free, thanks to that coach. And it's going to be fun. I don't think FSU wins tonight, but I think tonight might be another one of those moments where they realize that, man, we're capable of competing with really good basketball teams. And I hope that's the case and that we don't have like a kind of a flashback to, NC State. Hopefully that never happens again, but also to Georgia and the A&M games that happened earlier in the year where when it got tough, they kind of got going. They've been better at kind of standing in the paint and battling here. And listening to Luke on the Monday teleconference, he's talking about lacing them up and fighting and battling. So I think that's definitely been driven home to these guys in preparation for this one.
It seems like a culture check as much as anything, in addition to the maturation of Luke
So
adapting to the coach.
Beyond Luke, you got Derwin Kitchen, who played here. You got Michael Fly, who worked here on his way up the food chain and then came back as an assistant. Jim Moran doesn't have the FSU ties, but Jim's an excellent basketball coach. You got Coach Kent, who's got some ties to FSU. You got a lot of guys with skin in the game. You also got a lot of guys who like to coach basketball. I've sat at a lot of practices this year, both preseason. I went to one here in the past week too, and I've been to a few others throughout the season when time's allowed. They don't put up with bullshit. Just to be matter of fact, like, you're not going to waste their time. They're going to let you know you're wasting their time. Like, there are no kids' gloves in that gymnasium. And I think that teams go one of two ways when that's the way it's done. And in this day and age, and one is they check out, and this team hasn't checked out. The other is that they kind of take on that form of, like, coach is going to make us run our ass off at practice tomorrow if we don't do this. So let's go do this. And I think this group kind of figured that out. I think NC State was the point of no return, because if that continued, Luke was going to have a conniption, and a lot of those guys on that team were going to find themselves just living on the bench and never playing, not being able to work towards the aspirations they have for the next level as far as playing professionally at some level after FSU.
It felt like there was an element of, if you could just be screwed because you just didn't have the options to do that, to put someone on the bench and still have a sustainable, realistically like 500 type of ACC team. But you've managed that. You've moved pieces around. You seem to have a proof of concept building, which you don't always get in year one. They were very much so in the danger of zero proof of concept. So you have some of that, which will be helpful for future years as well. I'm going to bring Brett in. So Brett, you want to add yourself, but like real quick, Chris, as we transition to baseball talk, and if Brett, you can think of it. God, Brett just looks like baseball right now, by the way. Baseball or soccer? Definitely not football.
Definitely not soccer. Gosh.
But doesn't he look, Chris, doesn't he look like he could be either a soccer supporter or a baseball fan? It doesn't look like anything else other than those two.
Wearing my Lightning.
There you go. Go Bolts. I don't know.
That's basically soccer on ice. Is there any element, and if you can think of anything during your time covering baseball, Brett, I'd be interested, but Chris, for you, an example you can think of any of the FSU sports in recent memory where a coach has shifted their philosophical approach so drastically with success in season. Like, I can think of Mike Norvell doing some more option RPO running stuff with Jordan Travis in 2020 and 2021. But nothing really to this extent for me that I can think of schematically. This would be interesting for listeners as well. If you want to throw it on the board, you can think of anything resembling this at all.
I can't think of something that's been so abrupt. I can think of things that have been gradual. I mean, Leonard Hamilton teams went from being defensive suppression to more offensive open. Some of that was hiring of guys like Dennis Gates and CY, for example, and also getting better players. But that was a gradual thing. That wasn't like game 10 and then suddenly by game 14 they're dramatically different. Like, that's not it. You talking about football, yeah, there's examples of like, oh man, we're great at doing this, and they lean into doing more of this in season. But where it made a dramatic shift to what was happening in the season, I struggle to really put my finger on one that I feel is very similar.
Which is cool. That's cool that we're seeing that in real time be successul.
The team
last year was.
Well, I was going to add, the team that Luke was on late in his career, they didn't play very well early in the year. They were, I forget the record, but they were like, I don't know, maybe 9-6 or something like that. A few games over 500, but not playing really good ball. Then they were really, really good the rest of the year. There was a switch that happened there, but that switch was more a lot of veterans kind of realizing time's running out. Let's go play our best ball.
Yeah, it's a cultural shift, not the philosophy.
Where they went from being like, we're going to try to play games in the hundreds to like, if we got to play it in 50s or 60s, we're willing to do it. And like, everybody buys in. And again, I think in this day and age, that's a tough thing to ask.
What about Brett last year?
Smaller thing with baseball, but last year when they were really struggling to command the ball, they pretty much stopped like pitching to the corners of the plate and just started setting up down the middle and just saying, throw your stuff down the middle and let it play, and kind of just went away from like calling pitches to the outside half at times because they just wanted guys to get in the zone. So smaller thing, but that's something the Rays do sometimes too. But that was one thing I could think of.
Yeah, so it does, and that's more of like a a minutia type of thing, but it can make a big difference to mentality. So it's cool that we're seeing that happen in real time. Speaking of real time, it's getting real time for baseball. Do you like that transition there? Thank you for. Oh, no, it got worse. It got worse, Brett. All right, there we go. The sun. What's the instant Taitinger behind your
I
shoulder?
have no idea.
What do we think?
The owner of my apartment is a Frenchman, and all of our paintings here are French.
That's nice. Actually, you probably have
You feel more cultured.
we
You like our Lady in a champagne glass?
Yeah, I do. It's pretty cool. All right. So baseball season is right around the corner. February 13th. What day is that? Is that Friday? That's Friday.
Yes.
Friday.
Yeah. Baseball is right here. Opening against James Madison. Not quite the football level of efficiency from their baseball program. But in general, Brett, like I think the starting point for me here, and I got to go in 5 minutes. I'll let you guys take us home. But I'm curious if this is what the expectations are for this year. Now, is this a show you can sustain and remain being a college baseball team? A college World Series baseball team, or is this one that has the ability to level up and show that you are a real World Series, Omaha type of program year in, year out at this point?
Yeah, I think they expect to be that, and I think they want to show that, and I think they want to compete for it again and hopefully be a national seed again like they were a couple of years ago, because I think ultimately that's always your number one way to make it to Omaha. And it's just, we saw last year how hard it is to get it done on the road in a super at Oregon State, and being there, and you could feel it just with the road environment and how tough it is. So I think step one to getting back to Omaha is being a top 8 national seed, which I think is going to be tough this year with their schedule. I don't think the ACC did them any favors with their schedule, and they have a little bit of tougher competition to begin the year this year, especially going to Texas the second weekend of the season. But yeah, I think ultimately every year they're hoping to compete for Omaha and show that long term they're going to do that. They have really turned over rosters every single year the last 3 years. Basically, at least 50% of the roster has been new every single year. And last year they had to replace a ton coming off the Omaha run. And this year they're going to have to place a lot again. I mean, you have to replace Alex Lodis, who should have won the Golden Spikes last year. Jamie Arnold was the number 11 pick in the draft, and someone you just knew what you were going to get from every single Friday. And you can never really overstate that. And I mean, 9 other guys I think were drafted. So it's another year of having to replace a lot, but I think they did a decent job with the roster of replacing some of that production. And I definitely think that they expect to be competing for Omaha this year and every year moving forward.
My last question before let me get one before I get out of here. And then who the hell's this Mike Trout comparison? What's happening here? Explain to me like I'm 5, please.
Yeah, Link dropped that one on us last week. I saw someone mention it on the board, and then I had to go find it and see where he said it about John Stetzer, a freshman from North Georgia, who's in the outfield. Don't know for sure if he'll start on opening day.
I mean, if you have Mike Trout, you probably should start on opening day. I'm not a big baseball guy, but that would just be how I do it.
Yeah, I think Link was trying to make the athletic comp and the comp to that Mike was the high school shortstop like Stetzer was.
Okay.
And I don't know for sure if Trout played football or not. I can't remember, but Stetzer also played football at high school in North Georgia and was a pretty good football player and just a really pretty special athletic profile. I think Link has said he's the most explosive guy on their team testing wise, despite the fact they have Chase Williams as well. But I don't know for sure if John will start on opening day. If he does, it would be in right field or DH, but I think you have a lot of other options there too. And right, specifically Brody Delamelier, and DH, you have a few guys I think that are competing for DH at bats. So I don't know if it'll be right away on opening day that you see Stetzer, but I do think you'll see a couple of freshmen, him and Kelvin Paulino, will probably work in pretty quickly if they're not starting on opening day and get some opportunities. But yeah, I don't think Stetzer is quite Mike Trout. I don't think Link was trying to compare him exactly 1-to-1. But it is a special athletic profile, and we'll see how it comes along this year. But they're really excited about him, and they've spoken highly about him to a lot of people. I mean, there's a reason that he's being predicted as ACC Freshman of the Year by some outlets, and that probably has to do with how Link has spoken about him. So, yeah, we'll see how it develops throughout the year with Trout.
It's a bold take saying that he's not Mike Trout. All right, guys, I'll let you take us home. As long as have fun, don't burn it down any more than I would have. I'm going to just remove myself from the room. Hopefully, you guys can handle the end recording, and me leaving doesn't screw it all up. So, Godspeed.
Sounds good.
On John, the interesting thing is because they have kind of a crowded outfield, is they've also played him some at third in practices just to see. It's sort of just like we really need to get him on the field. They have a few of those guys. I think Link always feels the need to play as many as he can, but John's one they certainly want to get in there. My question is going to be, who's on the bump Friday? Who's your pick? Is it Beard?
Yeah, so coming into this weekend, I was leaning West pretty heavily, just from what I had heard throughout the fall and into the preseason about how West had looked really improved, and the stuff looked improved and the consistency of it had. And but coming out of this weekend and getting to see both of them on Friday, I came away pretty split on who I would choose on Friday. As of right now, I still think that West, I think, is going to be their choice, but I could see it going either way between West and Beard. But just the way that their outings went on Friday kind of just reminded me of why Beard had so much success last year at FAU. And just like his first inning went really badly. He let the first 5 hitters on base, but after that, he just got better and better and better. And obviously in a real start, who knows how that first inning ends up going and, if he gets out of it. But through the second through fifth, it felt like, Beard just got better and better and the velocity was ticking up. Whereas West, kind of the velocity was ticking down a bit, which I'm not used to seeing from West. And maybe that's just because it's the last outing of the preseason and he's trying to keep himself fresh. And we know off last year, like the velo held for the most part through late in outings. I mean, he was throwing 95 in the 7th against Mississippi State. But I think as of right now, I think they're going to go with West on Friday, being the guy that was here last year for them. And just I think when you grade out this stuff, I think, Beard probably has Beard's changeup would grade higher than West's, but it's not by as much as you'd think with the way West is throwing his changeup now. And it's consistently harder, consistently better, and getting whiffs pretty consistently. And then I think across the board, every other pitch for West would probably grade higher than Beard's. It is just, are you going to get the consistency on a West when the lights come on that you need to see from him? Because ultimately that's the step he needs to take. The stuff's always been there for West. It's just, can you get the stuff consistently in and around the zone? And I think if you do, he can be a very good Friday night starter. And then Beard would be a really good, consistent Saturday guy as well. But I think I would trust Beard on Friday as well. And I think it's something that will continue to develop throughout the year. But don't know for sure yet who's going to go on Friday. But I think West probably is going to be the guy.
Who do you think Sunday, if those are the two that battle it out for the first 2 spots?
Yeah, I definitely think Bryson Moore will be the third weekend starter. I think they're going to try to protect Moore throughout the season. However, he didn't extend out as much as West and Beard did on Friday. Moore was right to 60 pitches and cut off right at 60 pitches in the middle of an at-bat. Both of his last 2 seasons have ended because of arm soreness pretty much. I think they're going to try to make sure that they can get him through the whole season. And I think, they'll probably cap some of his outings at 4 or 5 innings and maybe try to piggyback him with like a Cole Stokes or someone like that, that they feel pretty strongly about. Stokes is probably, another arm that I was pretty impressed by Stokes on Saturday. He pitched the same amount that Moore did. But I definitely think with the consistency of how Moore has performed throughout the fall and the preseason, has earned him the 3rd starter spot. And I'll go a step farther and say that I believe Manka will be their 4th starter and start on the midweeks to begin the year as well. Just because he's seemingly earned it. They've spoken extremely high about what he's been doing. And it sounds like, his last few outings of the preseason went really, really well. And Link showed last year with Crest on the midweeks that he wants to have a 4th really good starter that he can rely on with the competition they play on the midweeks. I mean, you're going to play Florida 3 times on a Tuesday this year, like every year. So you want to know what you have going into those. And I think he believes it alleviates some pressure off the rest of the staff when you don't have to cover 7 or 8 innings out of the bullpen on Tuesdays. So yeah, I think Moore and Manka will be their 3 and 4.
Last pitching question. It's kind of a 2-for-1. Gabe Nard, Duke transfer. Is he an inning eater or is he more of like a crucial closeout guy? And who do you think is the most important piece of the bullpen bunch for them?
Yeah, I think I haven't got to see Nard yet. He didn't throw this weekend, but I think he threw during the midweek portion of the week when they were scrimmaging. And I do think they've extended him out a bit, not per se to a starter's level, but to a point where he can go and throw 3-4 innings out of the bullpen. I think he is more of that type than he is kind of a closer. Maybe he gets some closing opportunities here once in a while if the matchup's right. But I think Nard's more of like a sinker ball guy that's going to be in the zone and keep the ball on the ground. Maybe you bring him in some spots where you feel like you need a double play because he consistently keeps the ball on the ground. I think the ground ball rate last year would have been by far the highest on FSU's staff. And I think it would have been that way the last 3 years, maybe except for when Connor Whitaker was still at FSU because he kept the ball on the ground at a high rate. But yeah, I think Nard is just someone that you expect to produce a lot of ounce when he's out there with a lot of ground balls. I think Cade O'Leary is a really, really big piece to this bullpen. I don't think he's going to be a guy that extends out too much, but I think he's a guy that maybe you see 2 times in a weekend, and maybe that's a 1-inning spot. Maybe it's 2 innings, but I think they really like the stuff that he presents. It's a 4-pitch mix with a fastball that plays up from the low 90s, a really good hammer curveball that's really north and south, just a downer breaking ball that gives hitters trouble, and cutter and a changeup to go with it too. And then Stokes, like I said, Stokes is the slider is really, really special. I think it's by far the best right-handed slider they've had maybe the whole time I've covered the program. Like that's just been something consistently out of the bullpen they've kind of lacked is a really, really good breaking ball. They've had it with some left-handers like Wyatt Crowell. I think that you can compare Stokes' slider from the right side to Wyatt's from the left side, and just the ability to throw it like 80% and hitters know it's coming and they're still going to struggle to hit it just because it's that good of a breaking ball. For Stokes, it's just, can he command the fastball enough to stay in the counts and get to the slider? But like, even when he gets behind 2-0, 3-0, like he just comes back with the slider and rips it in the zone every single time with such consistency. So I think he's someone that they could use like Lincoln used Tanner Colehep at Notre Dame, or the way that they were using Wyatt before he went down. And that's just like a guy that you use once a weekend for 4 innings out of the pen. And you just piggyback him off your starter and say, you got the rest of the game, go and get it and close it out. So I think O'Leary and Stokes are 2 guys that will be really important to the pen.
All right, we're going to go rapid fire around the field. We talked about right field, bit of a platoon expectation there. I think it's fair to say center is Chase.
I think Chase and Dowd are both going to play center and left to begin the year. And I think they're going to go through the first 4 weeks, allowing both of them to get opportunities and see which one plays it better, just because Chase didn't play in the fall and Dowd was in the center for the entire fall while Chase wasn't out there. But I think they're both going to play a little bit of left and center, but it's going to be those 2 in left and center every single day. It's just a matter of which one plays which. Personally, I like Chase in center a lot. I just think he's a really, really special defender in center. Dowd's good too. Dowd just doesn't have quite the athleticism that Chase does. Obviously, in Hauser, like left field is a ton of ground to cover, maybe even more than center. But for the most part, like when you go and play other parks, like center is going to have the most ground to cover. So I think for me, Chase would be my center fielder, but I do expect both of them to play center and left to begin the year.
And then John probably fits into left in some form or fashion if he's not playing in right.
Yeah, I think John will probably. They've mostly worked him in right so far. Yeah, I think he did play left and center. He played left in the fall when Chase was out, and Dowd was specifically in center. But as of right now, I've only seen him work in right during the preseason. I don't think they're going to end up using him on the infield. I think they experimented with that a little bit, but ultimately, I think they kind of settled on right field for him for this year, and I think it'd be right in DH for him for opportunities.
Yeah, I think one of the days I was there, they had like 8 guys working at third base, but Cal Fisher be your third baseman again?
No, I expect Cal to start at short to begin the year. Yeah, I think Gabe Frazier, I think, is going to be the second baseman. And Gabe, I thought, looked really good at second this weekend. It's kind of a really similar situation to Drew Farrow's first year at FSU, where like Farrow kind of played short every single week until the very last week of preseason, and then he played second, and Alex played short. And they went from there, and it never changed. It's kind of been the same for Frazier. He repped it short mostly for all of fall and then early on in preseason. And then in this last week or so, they moved into second. And I think Link really liked how it looked there and how the double play pivot looked. And Link talks about the double play pivot as much as he talks about anything. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact Link played a lot of second base along with short. And he believes that second is actually a bit harder than playing short just because of the angles and the double play pivot and that stuff. So I think they feel really good about Frazier at second. Fish at short, I think the game clock has improved a lot from when I saw him in the summer playing short at the Cape. On the Cape, I just felt like he was really sped up in what he was trying to do after playing third. Obviously, Cal came in as a middle infielder, but pretty quickly moved to third with what they had out of necessity for last year, not his first year when Cam was there. But yeah, I think Cal is a little limited physically, athletically there compared to Lodi's. Like, you're not going to get as much range, but Cal, the glove work and the arm both look really, really good to me. And the game clock, like I said, is where it needs to be. And then third base, I think for me right now, it would probably be Carter McCulley. I just think McCulley is the guy out of the options there that you can trust by far the most defensively. And ultimately, when it comes to Link, I always fall back on who he trusts defensively. He's not going to put someone on the infield that he does not trust defensively. And I don't know if he's there right now with Eli Putnam defensively. So I think to begin the year, also with the way that Carter has swung the bat in the preseason, Link mentioned it, I think last week in his press conference, that Carter's had a really good preseason. And then this weekend, I thought he swung the bat really, really well, just barely missed a homer on Saturday and kind of impacted the ball throughout the weekend. This weekend, he actually didn't play third, but I think that was just because they know what they have there defensively, and they were just letting him rest his arm a little bit. So I think that's how the defense will align on the infield to begin the year next to Miles.
Yeah, Miles obviously dominating at first, boss man Bailey. Catcher, Link's talked a ton about it, probably more than he needed to his own admission. After being there for 2 days at Hauser this weekend, how are you feeling about behind the plate, Hunter Carnes playing off the bat?
Yeah, I think that was my biggest positive of this weekend, was just after Link had talked about it, his concerns with the catcher position. I came out of this weekend not concerned at all, and I don't think Link is concerned anymore. Carnes, I thought, looked really, really good. I thought he looked healthy, thought he looked comfortable. I thought he took multiple really good swings. He just missed a homer to center field. He had a double off Stokes on a really good slider to the pull side that he hit almost down as well. And then behind the plate, I thought he looked really good. I thought he was consistent. There was only one ball I felt like he kind of whiffed on. And then there were multiple plays that he showed off his athleticism with the block and then showing off the arm strength. And all weekend, like, it's little things, but the throws in between the innings, like almost every single one was extremely perfect, like just right on the money. And that was good to see from Carnes. And then Nate Schmelio's healthy again. He caught well this weekend. And then Caden Frommelt, who Link kind of praised for handling the load for a while there. He swung the bat decently this weekend as well. So I think they're in a decent spot now, catcher-wise. And Carnes is going to be the everyday guy, I think. And Carnes is a very, very important bat to what this year is going to be. I think Carnes needs to be your protection, or at least part of your protection for Miles. Whether that's hitting in front of him or behind him, that's a huge key to the season. Do you have enough to protect Miles, to allow Miles to get enough pitches to do the damage that he can and not let teams just pitch around him, which I think they do. We just need to see it once the season starts. But I do feel good about the catchers coming out of this weekend, especially Carnes. I think he's in store for a good year, and he still has the capability of being the highest drafted player on this team. I think just one, because he's a catcher, obviously the primary position, and two, just skill wise, he still has the talent of a potential first rounder.
If you enjoyed that talk, check out Sunday Golds. Brett and them do a great job covering baseball constantly. Brett loves that sport and he owns it. I'm glad baseball is back. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be doing opening weekend this weekend. Brett's heading to Texas for week 2. Real quick, softball 5-0 start. They go to Clearwater this coming weekend. Huge test there. They played 3 ranked teams over the 4 games. They'll play there, including number 1 Texas Tech, or at least number 1 last week. We'll see if they are again this week. I think that's it. So thank you for listening to On the Bench. I'm Chris. He's Brett. We also had Brendan. We had Zach. Good day today. Everybody have a great one. Take it easy.